This is Tell Me What It's Like, a show about extraordinary challenges, life-changing decisions, and defining moments. I'm Stacey Rain. Julie Melanson always knew that she was adopted. She grew up with extremely loving parents and had a very happy childhood. Fast forward 51 years to the day she decided to do some internet searching about her background, leading her to find her birth mother. It turns out their lives had nearly intersected so often over the decades. Julie, welcome to the show.
Stacey, thank you so much for having me. This is great.
I'm so glad that you are here. I would love to start just by talking about your childhood. You said you had a very happy childhood and you knew you were adopted, and let's just begin right there.
Okay. I did have a very happy childhood. My mother, who had adopted me, had lost a baby actually 7 years prior to them adopting me, and she could not conceive. And so they adopted me, and then about a year later, she got pregnant with my brother. We grew up in a very nice middle-class neighborhood. We had very wonderful extended family. I grew up with 17 cousins on my mother's side and many on my dad's side as well. And I went to private Catholic school, my whole life. And it was really just, it was a childhood that was filled with love and family and just wonderful memories. And my grandfather actually built a cottage on Lake Huron in 1938, and we would spend summers up there all together. So there would be 17 of us for the most part. My mom's sister had 11. I know. And but, you know, we were always closer to the people that we were closer in age to, and we all hung out together, and we just had such a great time and so many memories on that property. And to this day, we still, when we think about our childhood and talk about it, we were like, we were so lucky to have that. And you know, I always did grow up knowing that I was adopted. My mom, just from the time I can remember, would always say, you know, your mother must have loved you so much because it had to be so hard for her to give you up for adoption. And so there was never any big surprise. And it was a really, really great way as an adoptee to grow up.
Yeah. That, what you just said about how your mom talked about your birth mother gave me chills.
I know.
Like what a wonderful way to illustrate the sacrifice that your birth mom made for you.
Yeah, she did. And you know, I didn't realize, I think, until I found her, what a sacrifice it was and how hard it was, because, you know, I was born in 1956, and so whole completely different society than where we were even 15 years ago or more when I found her. And she just withstood the pressure of her mother, who really wanted her to abort me. And she just decided not to do that and stuck to her guns. And I think that relationship was a little challenging for her. So she was a pretty strong-willed individual to make that decision in 1956. Yeah.
Yeah, must have been. I definitely want to talk more about her and finding her, but I'm still so interested in these 17 cousins you had playing in a lake house.
Yep.
It sounds like an ideal childhood.
It was wonderful. And then we had this cottage, which really was not very big. I mean, really, when I think about it, it just came down a couple of years ago. But it was about 800 square feet. And there was a bathroom. And then we did have an outhouse, right? And then my grandfather in the garage had finished off the top level of the garage as a big bedroom. So because my mom had the smaller family, got to sleep in the cottage, sometimes with a cousin, right? Which was kind of nice because there was a bathroom right there.
Yeah.
But the other ones, my aunt that had 11, she would walk up at night and they talk about the story about how she would go up and the moon would be out and she would sing the song, Me and My Shadow, and they would dance on the way up to getting to their sleeping area. And then my uncle and aunt, who had 5, there was a friend of ours that had a small place behind us, and so they would rent that. And it was funny because my mom's brother, he would always, like when they were having dinner, he would just lock all the doors to the cottage, and no one could go in. And he would say, "No, we're having dinner now. You all stay out there." And nowadays, I don't think any parent would ever do that. They would be, it's a whole different approach to parenting. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
We were a little horrified at the time, but, we all survived. We didn't lose anybody.
You're in a pretty nice setting, too, to be outside. So
we were.
Can't feel too bad. Out of all the 17 cousins, were you the only one that was adopted?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I was. Yeah.
Did you ever think about that growing up?
Probably not so much until I got to be in high school, in my teen years, and then I kind of became curious. I knew that I didn't look like anybody. I knew that. I knew I was adopted. I wasn't treated any differently, although I think that my grandfather, and he passed when I was 11, but I think he always he was great. I think he treated me very specially because it was his granddaughter that was adopted and that came into the family after they had lost a daughter. So I think that was always very special. And that's kind of at that point is when I decided where I knew where important papers were. And I thought, I'm just going to see what I can find out. And I found my birth certificate and I found my adoption papers. And so I knew my birth name was Kim Marie Sparbeck. I knew that. And, back then there was really no internet. So I resorted to the white pages to look up to see if there were people. Yeah.
So you got curious after a while.
I did. And then I kind of got over it, I think, in a way. I mean, the thing that has always been a challenge, I think, for me throughout my life, and probably even still now to some degree, is, when you have medical issues and, or you're going in and there's always that questionnaire about your background and it's like, well, no, not applicable. I was adopted,
Yeah, what's your medical history? Do your parents have this or that or the other? And it's like, how would you know?
How do you navigate that,
Yeah. Which must, I would imagine when you're filling out that paperwork and someone, let's say maybe, you've had some kind of weird symptom. I don't know if this ever happened to you, but I'm just thinking this through. And they say, well, do your parents have, whatever? And you're like, I have no idea. Like making this sort of situation a little worse.
Yes, it was, because I'm sure that I went through probably unneeded testing on certain things, right? Just for them to be able to rule things out. And so that was, that part has always bothered me. And I think when I finally did find my birth mother, Diana, I think to some degree she was, I don't want to say offended, but surprised that was one of my driving factors, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, because for her, obviously, it was extremely emotional, right?
Oh, she can't begin to imagine.
I can't. She talked about my birth and said that, she went into the hospital and gave birth, and back then they would whisk the baby away and you would not even ever see your baby, right? And
she never even saw you.
She did. She had a fight with a nurse and went down into the nursery, and she said she held me and rocked me for about an hour. And so
I as a mom, it makes me tear up just even thinking about the decision she had to make. Because, there's nothing like seeing your baby, rocking your baby, meeting your baby for the first time. And to know that I'm just it makes me want to cry. It makes me cry just thinking about it.
Yeah. And she didn't have a great childhood. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, she had an older brother, and then that I think was about 5 years older than her. And then she had a sister 14 years younger that had Down syndrome. And the
Mm-hmm.
parents were not always happily married. So they would
Yeah.
take the kids, and her brother would go to the grandparents, and her sister would go to an aunt, and she would always go to this orphanage in Michigan called the Sarah Fisher Home. And she got to a point and she told me that, like the nuns, she loved them. She wanted to stay with them. She did not want to leave the orphanage. That was
Oh.
a real constant for her. And that she was so great at making beds that they would have her teach any of the new children that would come in, how to make their bed and keep things in order. And
Why was she at the orphanage?
because her parents would split up, and then they
Oh,
would drop them off at different places, not even together, right? So it was just a
that's bizarre.
it was. Her childhood was very, very bizarre. And I don't really have a lot of information about my grandfather, but I
Yeah.
know that her relationship with her mother was very stressed over many, many years, and that there's a lot of things that her mother did or didn't do that most parents would be there for their children. And she wasn't. And she talked about how she needed to find a way. She was working toward forgiveness, right, for her mom. And so that was
Yeah.
really a struggle she had for a long time because she passed at 70.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I want to back up just a little bit and sort of talk about, this beautiful, happy childhood you had. You knew you were adopted. Your mom was very open about it, very loving about it.
Mm-hmm.
The way that she would describe, that decision to you and how grateful you've told me that she said that she got to raise you.
Mm-hmm.
When did the sort of concept of being adopted start? When did you start to understand that as a child?
I think it had to be probably around 10, because at around that age, I knew I was adopted. I was open about the fact. If somebody asked me, a question or a subject came up about, well, where did your grandparents come from? Right? I would say, I don't really know. I was adopted. And, back then, and even today, I've had this happen to me where someone will say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry."
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you're like, no, you don't have to be sorry. I have a wonderful family,
Yeah.
but there was always a stigmatism about adoption, right? And it
Interesting.
was about that the birth mother probably didn't want you. And I just never wrapped my brain around that because my mom had always said how much she loved me and how hard it had to be for her, which was really
Yeah.
completely accurate. Yeah.
We obviously can't know every situation that ever happens, but I would imagine most of the time these mothers desperately love their babies.
Yeah.
I mean,
think so too.
as moms ourselves, I think we can
Yeah.
just imagine the agony,
Yeah, I just can't imagine her withstanding the pressure of her parents putting on her to abort me. And,
Right.
it's not like this conception was a happy conception. She was raped.
Okay.
So
Goodness.
she did kind of know the person. It was a cousin of a friend. But so it wasn't like, oh, it was a beautiful love story, and
Right.
I want to give birth to this love child, right?
Yeah.
I think
Trauma
what
for
drove her probably was just that she wanted to give someone a chance at life. And by giving me up, I think, as hard as that was, eventually, after we met, she said she came to the conclusion that it was absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah. I love the way that your mom would talk about her to you.
I know.
What a gift she gave you.
And as I got older, and my mom was for sure through my life one of my best friends, right?
Yeah.
We were so close, and so as I got a little older and had thought about actually doing some searching, I just thought, it's not worth it to put my mom through that, because I think that would have been something that would have been very, very hard for her. Because in her mind and in our life, I was her daughter, and I was her daughter the moment they handed me to her. And so
she said that to you, right?
She did. She said that to me, that when they handed you to me, you were mine. And
she just felt this instant connection with you.
Yeah,
that she
was
knew.
Great. And it was,
hers.
what was so interesting too, as I think about this, is at night, my mom was always they were very, very good Catholics. And so at night we would say our prayers, right? And one of the things, we would say, good night, dear Jesus, good night, Holy Mary, good night to my guardian angel, because I'm, being guarded. And then good night, little Tracy. And little Tracy was my sister that passed away. So I always, and to this day, if I'm saying that prayer, I still say the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, but I thought that was beautiful that she was included in our life in that way.
Yeah, I love that. Your mom must have been a superb woman.
She was a very special person. One of the things that the way I like to describe her is she was as innocent the day that she passed as the day she was born.
Yeah.
She was just one of those people. Mm-hmm.
And the fact that she would say these things to you about how much your mom must have loved you, did you sort of feel your birth mom's love growing up because of that?
I felt like that had to be a really hard thing for her. And, the story that I had come to believe, and I don't know what they told her when they adopted me, was that my father was a professor and my mother was a student. And so I always thought of it as kind of, unrequited love. And so, it was fine. I was fine. I was just always so grateful for the life that I had. And I had so much respect for my parents and my family and our extended family and just all of it, and they were all very connected, right? They were just all very connected. They all grew up together, basically. I mean, my dad and my uncle were neighbors from the time they were 2. And my aunt that married my uncle, my mom's brother, she was my mother's roommate in college.
Oh, wow.
So there was
so close,
so many years of history there. Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually, you decide you're not going to really look for your mom when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
But at 51, you do. What happened? What changed?
Well, I think there were a few things that changed. I think my life had changed. I had remarried when I was 40, about 40, and had a very happy life. I had moved to Massachusetts. My children were in college, and my husband had 3 children. And so that was, and we were very happy, and I just think it was really like a good match. And to be honest with you, I think if my mother was still alive, I probably never would have done that. I would not have moved, right? Because I don't know if I could have left her. My dad ended up getting remarried, which made it a little bit easier. But so I moved to Massachusetts, and it was just such an open uh, mindset. Let's just say that in Massachusetts, right? And so my husband and I were just curious one night on watching the news, and they talked about us looking on the internet and all the things you could find out about each other. And so we decided in the morning that we would start to look. And I thought, well, I might as well look and see. I know what my birth name is. So we searched and we found a lot of Sparbecks in Michigan.
Yeah.
And we found a woman that we thought, oh, it's probably this Joanne, because the age just seemed right, for that.
Yeah.
And
this was in like early 2000s? Is that when this was? Or
yeah,
before
so
that?
let's see, 2000. Yeah, so this is, I'm 69 now, so that would have been 18
Okay.
years ago. Yeah, so,
Yeah.
51. Yeah, 52.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and I thought, well, do I want to even reach out? I mean, there was a phone number, there was an address, there was so much information. I couldn't even believe it. And so I just decided later in the day that I thought, I'm just going to leave a message and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And I'm going to
So
leave a very non-confrontational message.
Yeah. So you just basically said, okay, I know my name was this. I'm going to figure out if these people are nearby. I'm going to look for someone around the right age, and I'm going to call them. And you leave you leave a message.
Knowing full well that I had already come to the conclusion that it could be, one of three things could happen. I could find someone that would say, no, I'm not your mother, right?
Yeah.
I could find someone that would say, I am your mother, but I don't really want to have anything to do with you. Or I could find someone that would say, I'm your mother, and, I do want to have a relationship with you, right?
Were you okay with all three options? Like, what if someone had said, I don't want to see you? Okay.
I think I was, because I had really spent some time thinking about that. And then when I finally decided to make the call and I got a voicemail, and I thought, well, okay, I'm just going to just say, I'm looking for, Joanne Sparbeck, and I'm trying to get some health information for my family. And my intent is not to cause any issues, just to get some information, and asked if they could call back. And I waited 4 days, and finally her son called back. And I think he realized what I was looking for, and he told me that his mother, it couldn't be his mother. She had married into the family. But he put me in contact with an uncle that had all of the family history. It was amazing to me that his mother had passed, but like he still had lived in that house, still had her phone number. I mean, it was like the stars kind of aligned.
Just worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
did you hear back from this uncle?
Eventually, it took a little while, about a month, and we eventually connected.
It's a long time to wait.
Yeah,
you made this decision, and now you got to wait.
Well, I think now in hindsight, I think he was a little nervous. Like, I know that this cousin who I was talking to, that he didn't know the history, but the Uncle Jerry, my birth mother was his cousin, right? So he was very aware of the family dynamics. And so he had asked me if I could send a picture, which I did. And then he sent me a picture of a woman that would have been my grandmother, Gertrude. And he said, I think there might be a connection here. And it was interesting because he was a professor down at Wayne State University in Detroit. And so he had said, I'll put a family tree. Would that be helpful? And I'm like, that would be great.
So he didn't know, but he said, you kind of look like this woman?
Well, he said I think there might be a connection. So when he sent me the family tree, my husband or I, you print it out, it's on 4 pieces of paper, and you're taping it all together to see what does it look like. And we finally kind of landed on this one person, Diana Healy. And I said to him, I think it might be Diana Healy. And
Why?
he said,
Why'd you think that?
Because of the year that the years, the age,
Okay.
her age just seemed like if you're a teenager,
sense.
what are you going to be? 16, 17, maybe
Yeah.
18, right? And that was her age. And he said, I think you could be right. There was a year in high school when she went away to the convent.
Mm.
And I thought, well, okay,
Makes
that
sense.
kind of makes me think it's her. But he did ask me to wait a while before I reached out. So I did.
Why?
Well, I think now that I've met him. He's no longer here either, but I have met him. He was nervous that she was going to be angry that he
At
had
him.
passed on and passed on this information. He didn't know how she was going to feel.
Yeah.
And so that's even made it easier for me in some respects when I finally decided, and again, another month later, I waited to call because I thought, well, what I'm going to say is, my name's Julie Melanson. I think I may be related to your family.
Mm-hmm.
When I did call, she said, well, how do you think you're related? And I said,
I wonder if she knew in that moment.
I said, I think I am the granddaughter of Gertrude Sparbeck.
Mm.
And there was a pause.
This was on the phone. You called and she answered.
Mm-hmm. And she said, and I am your mother, and I have been looking for you for the last 5 years. Yeah.
She said she'd been looking for you.
Yep. And she said,
what did your heart do?
I just thought, I can't believe I'm having this. I'm getting a chill. I thought, I can't believe I'm having this conversation. And she got all excited and she said, and you have, 3 brothers, a sister, 8 nieces and nephews. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, what were you thinking? What was going through your mind? This is a really important moment.
It was a very important moment. I think I thought I had prepared myself for how I would feel, but I think to hear someone say they've been searching for you as well was really just something that was amazing. And to realize that as she was telling me so quickly, well, you have this and you have that, and you have, the other parts of her life, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much of an impact it must have really had on her, right?
Yeah.
Because, and for me, I just thought, well, okay. And so we proceeded, I proceeded carefully, right? And we talked for about an hour and we exchanged pictures. I was amazed at the resemblance that we had. Yeah,
you
because
looked a lot like her?
I could be her twin. And
oh, wow.
And I'll tell you, I never grew up with anybody ever looking like me. So, that was kind of exciting to have that. And
yeah,
what
did you talk about in that first hour?
Well, we talked about our families. We talked about where we lived, which was really interesting to me because I grew up in a very, a 1 square mile town. City.
Everybody was right in there.
Yep. And she was right in the next town over.
Oh.
And then I found out that we belonged to the same church. So we were all in the same church together.
Wow. Do you think you had seen her?
I'm thinking in all of those years, I'm sure there had to be a time.
Passed her.
I know. And she said she would always, wherever she would go, her eyes would always be looking, thinking, does she look like me? Does that girl look like me?
I was just wondering that because that's what I would do, is just be constantly wondering what happened to my baby. Did you tell her about your happy childhood in that first call?
I told her that I had very great adoptive parents and that
that probably made her so happy.
My mom had passed, but, and I had a brother and a very happy childhood. And and so, I think we started, and that was kind of how we started. And then after about an hour, I think I said, all right, well, let's exchange our information, and we can set up another time to talk. And so she, at that point in time, my career was crazy. I was traveling all over the world for work. And, but when I was home, of course, I was happy to be home and I wanted to be home. But then she would call and she would talk. It would be like hours, right? Hours.
She'd spent 51 years
I know,
waiting for you.
And it was fine, except finally at one point I had to say, I just got home. I need a little bit of time to settle back in, And the one thing about her that was really wonderful was she was always so respectful of how I felt. She really was respectful. She was welcoming. She was loving, but she was very respectful of how I felt and what I was going through in finding her. And so and honestly, it seems so strange to me in a way that at that point in time was the time that we connected. And then when I learned about her spirituality and how important this was to her and how much she prayed for it, I realized
to find you again.
Yes, that, things do happen, through the power of prayer. And there are things that happen as a result of, I don't know if you want to say manifesting or wanting or however you want to think about it. But because there was no specific reason why that day would be the day that I would pick up the phone,
Yeah.
But I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful that it happened. And we connected and we actually had 8 months together, which was wonderful. And so after about a month, my husband and I flew to Michigan to meet her. And before that, I actually told my dad about it. And he was, because he was still alive, and he was great. I was so nervous about that, and he was so supportive. After my mom had died, he sent me all my adoption papers, so I had everything. And so I told him, and then I told my children, of course. And I also told my brother and sister-in-law because we were all very close, and my niece and nephew. And
you were going to see
brother,
her.
Yeah, my brother kind of had a little bit of a hard time with it, I think,
Really?
Yeah, I think it was always just the two of us, and now there's this new person kind of that's coming into the picture. But we went and we met her, and we spent 9 hours together the first day.
I got to know about the first moments, though, Julie. Like where were you? Who was there first? What was that first moment like when you laid eyes on her? Tell me about that.
I was there first. My husband and I were there first, and we were waiting.
Where was it?
We were waiting in the lobby of a beautiful hotel in Rochester, Michigan.
Okay.
And we were standing there, and I was getting kind of nervous, And then I saw her a car pull up, and the valet, he's handing her this huge bag, and she walked in, and she had on a full-length mink, and she had blonde hair, and she was just such a strong personality and so happy to meet me, and we hugged, and she was so happy to meet my husband, and it was great. I mean, it was great. It was exciting. I get chills when I think about it.
She waited 51 years for that moment.
Mm-hmm. And my husband was stunned at how much we looked alike.
Really?
Even more so mannerisms. He said, you tilt your head the same way, you do this the same way,
That's so interesting.
It was. And we had a beautiful brunch, and I remember telling her, saying, thank you for giving me life, and I gave her, I think it was a CD back then, when it was of Josh Groban. And it had this song on there, The Prayer, that's very well known, right? And the thing about that song that I loved was, lead us to a place, take us to a place, that's going to be wonderful for both of us. And that was really my wish, was that it was going to be a wonderful experience for both of us to have this,
Yeah. I know it was for her.
I know.
I just, like, my mama heart is
I know. I can't
soaring
imagine.
at the fact that she gets to hug her baby for the first, second
And
time, I guess.
They kicked us out of the restaurant. We went over to the bar. She didn't drink. I think at that point I must have had a drink because it was a little bit of a... And again, my husband was like, Julie, I can't tell you how much you two are alike. And so we had that wonderful day. In fact, my sons called me and said, what are you doing? Why didn't you call us? What's going on? I said, we're still here. We're still talking, So
Did you send them a picture?
I did. I have pictures of that. And it's actually, I have pictures in the back of my book of the meeting day and everything. It was great.
Were you able to send them to your sons? What did they say?
Yeah, the same thing. And, it was great because we had that day. So then we left eventually, and I went back and was filling my brother and sister-in-law in, and I talked to my dad and my kids, and, that was all great. And our kids here in Massachusetts as well. And and then we were on the phone all the time, or we'd send pictures back and forth, or we'd talk about something that just happened in the day, or that kind of thing, and it just became it just slowly kind of became incorporated in my life. And then she really wanted us to meet her other children and nieces and nephews. And so we came back again in March. That really made me a little nervous because I think at that point I was thinking, well, if I were these children, okay, and they knew that their mother had given up someone for adoption, which she had told them years before. And now she says, somebody reached out to me, this is my daughter, and I want you to meet her. And we were having all of these great conversations, and I'm sure that they had to be thinking, what is this woman's intent? Right?
You
what
think?
Is she trying? Yeah. I don't, I do. I'm sure those conversations had to happen. I'm sure.
Like, why after all these years?
Yeah. Why would you look? Right. And so we came in, we flew in, we went to one of my brother's homes, and they're all standing there at the door when I walked in. And one of my brothers, Chris, said, well, no DNA test needed here. Because we were
you
like
look so much like your
images
mom.
Yeah.
Oh, and your brother, you looked like your brothers too.
Yeah. Well, what
was that
more
like
my
for
mom.
you?
Actually, I think I have one brother that I think he and I have said we look kind of like each other, but not nobody else in the family.
It was just your mom. But you walked in and they were like, well, mom, this is definitely mom's daughter.
And she used to have red hair and she hated it. So she dyed it blonde. And then eventually she dyed it to red again. So, okay. But, and they gave me this really funny card. It was everybody in a convertible and them yelling out, you're one of us now. And they gave me this beautiful bouquet of tulips. And I said, tulips are my favorite flower. And they said, they're mom's favorite flower too.
Oh my goodness.
I know. So that was kind of fun.
Strange. That is
so we
really
had a really
incredible.
fun night. Yeah. And at the end of that night, I was there with my brother Paul and his wife Amy. And so Amy, she was very vocal, which was good. It's a great trait for her. And she said, so what are we going to do now? Now are we celebrating Christmases together? Or what do we do? And
how do we move forward?
And I said to her, I have a great family. I said, I'm not looking to, replace my family. I have a great family, but, I obviously we'd like to stay in contact. And so that that part was able to happen, but it was slow. It was slow. I didn't actually meet one of my brothers until the day that my birth mother died, because
Oh.
he was gone that weekend. He had to entertain clients, and so he was not there. And she came out to Boston, where we were living, for
Did
Mother's
she?
Day. It was great. Yeah, it was great.
That must have been exceptionally special for you both.
It was. And, my one son here in Boston was driving up, and she was standing on the porch and having a cigarette. And he said, he knew I didn't smoke, but he said, "I thought that was you."
No.
No.
Picked up a new habit.
No, but she got to meet all of my husband's side of the family, and my two sons, and my oldest granddaughter, because my daughter was in the hospital. She had she was pregnant, and she was having problems with the pregnancy.
Oh, goodness.
So we celebrated my granddaughter's 3rd birthday. We had a big party, and then so it was really special.
Did your mom ever talk about what it meant to her to find you again?
My mother wrote a book of poems, and the name of the book of the poems was called Remains to be Seen. And in these poems, you could see what she was like. She was like the rebel activist. She was doing the sit-ins. She was the one getting arrested around Vietnam. She was just a very strong-willed, strong, opinionated woman. And
well, you think back to what she had to endure just to have you, to give you life. Like, of course, she must have been strong-willed.
Oh, it's amazing. And I think that that's definitely a quality that I got from her.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you can see through these poems the different parts and different times in her life and how she felt about that, because she would write about relevant things, like things about the war, things about having children. She wrote this beautiful poem that I actually have included, and started each chapter off with one of her poems in my book. But the first one is talking about the casting director, and the casting director is God. And he's going through what her life is going to look like. And she's saying, "Are you sure? Can't I have this? Can't it be, there's really special people that come into this world. Can't I be one of them?" And he's like, "No, I've cast this role for you." And one of them was, you're going to be beautiful, you're going to be smart, you're going to have plenty of children. And she said, "Oh, I really like this part about having a lot of children." And the response is, "Not all are yours to keep." And so I think that definitely she was referring to me.
Yeah.
But it was really just, it was funny. She gave me, when the day we met, she gave me this book. And as many times as I've read it, I never tire of reading it.
Yeah.
And it just gives me such an insight into where she was, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s.
Who she was,
yeah. It's a great gift.
But then she passes really soon after you meet her. When I heard your story, I was like, that feels so unfair.
Yeah, she did. When I'm trying to think. I think when I came in to meet my siblings, is we also did a lunch where she was able to meet my two sons.
Oh, nice.
And so she was really happy about that. And but after after Mother's Day, when she was out there over Mother's Day weekend, she went home, and we still stayed in contact, and we made this plan for everyone to get together at the cottage up on the lake. And, we were going to have that time, and we were planning that. And so we were going out about a week before then, and I was packing. It was always like, and we had a golden retriever, and we always had a lot in our car.
Gotcha.
So I'm still in Boston, and we're packing to drive back to Michigan for our annual 2 weeks at the lake. And, it was interesting because the Thursday before, I was trying to reach her, and she never called me back. And I can remember saying to my husband, Rob, I said, "It's so strange." I said, because she always calls me back. She's right on it. Like if I call, she's always calling me back. And I was so busy over the weekend packing and getting things together. I didn't really spend a lot of time with my cell phone. It was in my office. And I went up there on Sunday and I saw all these missed calls from my brother, Chris. And I called him and he said that they had been trying to reach her probably from Thursday on, and no one could get a hold of her. So they drove out. It wasn't like they were that physically that far from her, but her best friend drove out and said, she's not answering the door. Her car is here. I can see her purse on the table. Everybody head out there, and they called the police for a wellness check, and she was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, he said, we're planning the funeral and, we would love if you could be here. And so we, at that point, just finished and got in the car and just drove, to Michigan so we could see her. She was going to be cremated, but the funeral home was going to let us have some time the night before the funeral to actually see her. So
that must have broken your heart.
It was hard. That was really, I think that was probably the most I've ever cried in my life, the whole way back, because and we stopped at one point, we had to stop to sleep. And I remember just thinking, I think I'm crying for 51 years that I finally found her and now she's gone.
Yeah.
I was very lucky in that, everyone was so welcoming. When I got to the funeral home, I met my other brother, his family, and we prayed. And my son Paul was able to be with us, so we had that support. And then we went afterwards to my brother's house, my brother Paul's house, to have like food. But they included me in everything. And I didn't want to overstep because I felt like I'm like the newcomer here. And so I would go to things that they wanted me to be at, to plan the service. But I would try really hard not to say too much just because it's their mother, it's their mother. I mean, it's my mother. And they said, we have a habit of always calling her my mother, even to like their brother, they'll say my mother, not like our mother. And so, and we always call her my mother when we're all together, mom or, and so we had that. And it was such a strange experience to be, there were, I don't know how many hundreds of people at this funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody would walk by and stop and they would point at me and stare at me because of two things. One was because of how much I looked like her, but also because I was included in the obituary. And people that were close family friends would say, who is this person? I never knew who this person,
Where'd she come from? Yeah.
Where'd she come from? Right. So.
Well, I have to imagine that she passed very happy and thankful that she got time with you.
She did.
Yeah.
She did. She had met not only my sons, but she had met my dad. She wrote him a beautiful, beautiful letter that thanked him, and she said, the questions have now been answered. And I am so grateful that you and Agnes, my mom, had raised her, and you did such a wonderful job. She's a beautiful daughter, and you should be so proud. And I now know I made the right decision. I know. I now know I made the right decision.
Yeah, because she spent 51 years wondering what happened to you. Did you have a happy childhood?
Yeah.
Just wondering,
it was amazing.
Did you have the life that she hoped she gave you?
You would have, yeah.
And then when she found you, you answered her question. It's really beautiful. Yeah. And so you're grieving hard during this time, and you decided to write a book.
There were so many things about our lives that were similar. Now I say similar. I remember when I first decided to write the book, I thought, well, our lives were so different, and I didn't have a childhood like that. I had a wonderful childhood, but I did have other issues. I did have problems like I got married young at 20.
Mm-hmm.
It was a terrible marriage, abusive marriage.
Sorry.
But, you know, I just thought about all of the different parts that were so special, all the different things that I had learned, all the different times that our lives could have touched each other, and we came so close. I mean,
Yeah.
like living in the next town over, like being in the same church. My mother taught my half sister in 5th grade. So she had to have met my mother, right, at parent-teacher conferences, right? And then as my children grew into their professional careers, one of my sons, his boss, was best friends with one of my brothers. And and my other son, his boss, was a woman, and she was the head of the CRNAs down at Henry Ford Hospital, and she was the mother of my stepsister-in-law.
Oh my goodness.
And all this time, all these things are going on, and then, my dad eventually remarried, and the woman that he remarried, we didn't know. I mean, we knew them because we were all part of the same church and organizations and things like that.
Yeah,
but can't come to find out that she knew my birth mother and her husband and the kids because they were all involved in sports and they would all socialize together.
Yeah.
And so it was just
amazing.
I know.
And you drew from her poems for your book, including the title, which is Not Yours to Keep.
Not Yours to Keep. And it was funny because I said to my husband one day, I said, I have to come up with, like a description of the story. And he looked at me and he just goes, it's a story about adoption and the strength and resilience of women. Yeah. I'm like, oh, thank you.
Your mom was
That's perfect.
Such a strong woman to do the things that she did, including giving up a precious baby.
Yeah. And very resilient.
What do you feel like people can learn from your story?
I think that there's a couple different things that come to mind. One is nurture versus nature. And I can talk about that a little bit. And I think the other part is, fate versus coincidence, right?
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of times when we almost could have touched each other and it just didn't happen. But the nurture versus nature part was very interesting to me because, and it actually still is, because when I think about my adoptive family, that's my family, and just the things that I learned from them, right?
Yeah.
About love and the love of family and the love of commitment and the love of support and the always being there no matter what. I mean, that was something, those values are things that I learned from my family.
Yeah.
But when I think about how I am as a person, right? I'm a very driven individual. I think I'm a pretty confident. I think I grew into the confidence I have. I don't think I necessarily had as much when I was younger. Not that I couldn't have. I just don't think that I had it. And I kind of grew into a very confident woman. And just a lot of the things that she had gone through, we shared. And so I just thought it's really important that I document this, right?
Yeah.
Not just for me, but for a lot of adopted people that, sometimes it's not always a happy situation, right? And I'm lucky, I'm fortunate enough that mine was. But I mean, I still had people, again, still to this day will say, I was adopted. Oh, I'm so sorry. And it's like, no, adoption can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, Julie, your story is an amazing one, and I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to talk about it here on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to Julie Melanson for sharing her story about being an adoptee and finding her birth mother at 51 years old. Next week on Tell Me What It's Like, Lisa Skinner on helping families navigate caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's. I'm Stacey Rain. Thanks for listening.